The wind howled low through the slats of the abandoned barn just outside Dustwater Ridge. With its broken beams and leaning frame, most folks thought it ready to collapse with the next heavy rain. But inside, buried beneath a mound of hay in the loft, a young woman lay trembling. Her name was Lena Granger, and she'd been on the run for 5 days. A bruise still colored the side of her cheek, half covered by strands of her chestnut hair. Her once fine dress, torn and muddied from fleeing across hard land, clung to her thin frame. Every rustle of wind or creak of old would send a jolt of panic through her. She wasn't just hiding from a cruel husband. She was hiding from the law, a bounty placed on her head by the same man who had spent 3 years breaking her spirit. Now he claimed she'd stolen from him. But the only thing Lena took was her freedom, and a ledger that held proof of his crimes. As she clutched it to her chest in the silence of the barn, Lena prayed she could stay invisible just a little longer. But fate, as it often does in the West, had other plans. Chapter 2. The Cowboy with Quiet Eyes. Reid Dalton didn't look like a man who'd lost everything, but he had. Years ago, a bandit raid had taken his younger brother and half his land. Now 32, with quiet hazel eyes and callous hands, he worked what was left of his ranch with patience and grit. He spoke little, but when he did, it was with kindness. One dusty morning, while checking his fence line near the old McTavish barn, property he'd acquired but left mostly untouched, he heard the faint whimper of something alive. Figuring it was a calf or stray dog, he pushed open the creaky door. What he found instead was a pair of terrified, fire-bright eyes staring back at him from the hay. "Don't come closer." Lena's voice cracked with panic. "I've got a pistol." Reid paused, hands held up. "I ain't armed," he said calmly. "And you don't look like someone who's keen on killing. Just someone who's been running too long." Her hands shook, the pistol she'd found in an abandoned drawer barely steady. But his voice, it wasn't like the others. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't loud. It was kind. "I'll leave," she whispered, coughing. "Just let me go." Reid studied her. You ain't fit to walk 10 feet. You're fevered. Looks like you've been starving." "I got water. Maybe a blanket." Lena's eyes filled with tears. She hated herself for how her body swayed with weakness, how her bones ached. She hated needing anyone. But she didn't stop him when he climbed up and handed her the canteen. It was the first kindness she'd tasted in years. Chapter 3. A Shelter of Quiet Moments. Over the next week, Reid brought Lena food and supplies without questions. She still slept in the loft, always watching him, never letting her guard fully down. But bit by bit, she softened. Trust, after all, was like spring in the West. It didn't come fast, but it bloomed just the same. One morning, she joined him outside the barn, wrapped in a wool blanket. "I used to play piano," she said, eyes fixed on the horizon. Reid didn't interrupt. "My husband, he broke my fingers once. Said I played too loud. Said people might start asking questions." Reid's jaw clenched. "You ain't with him now. You're safe here." She gave a dry laugh. "Safe don't exist for women like me." Reid looked at her then. "Maybe not everywhere, but I reckon Dustwater's still got a place for those looking to start over." He handed her a worn leather glove. "Come mend a fence line with me. It helps to feel useful." She hesitated, then slid it on. It was the first time she'd chosen to walk toward someone, not away. Chapter 4. Storm on the Horizon. Word travels fast in dusty towns. Sheriff Briggs, a man who hated trouble more than he cared for justice, rode up to Reid's homestead 2 weeks later with a wanted poster flapping in his hand. "This, huh?" he asked, spitting tobacco into the dirt. "Woman's got a $500 bounty on her. Said to be dangerous." Reid stood between the sheriff and the porch. "Ain't dangerous. And that bounty? Lies printed by a man who hurts women. You know the type." "Maybe so," Briggs muttered. But the law's the law. Reid narrowed his eyes. Then the law better check the papers she's got. Ledger from her husband's bank. Names, deals, bribes. Might be a lot of lawmen in that list. Maybe even you. Briggs stiffened. You threatening me, Dalton? No, sir, Reid said evenly. Just saying I'd hate to see a good man dragged down by another sin. The sheriff left, but Lena heard every word from inside. That night, she sat beside Reid beneath a blood-orange sunset. You risked a lot, she said softly. I got nothing left to lose, he answered. Then after a moment, but maybe I'm finned in something worth keeping, Dut. Chapter 5. The Reckoning. Lena decided the running had to stop. The ledger she carried all this way, evidence of her husband's embezzlements, frauds, and payoffs, would rot in the dark as she kept hiding. I want to take this to a judge, she told Reid, fingers tight on the book. But I can't do it alone. You ain't alone, he replied. Together, they rode to Clearwater, a larger town 2 days' ride east, where a federal judge was known for his intolerance of crooked dealings. It wasn't an easy journey. They were followed once. Lena swore she saw her husband hired men at a watering hole. But Reid stayed by her side, gun holstered, eyes sharp. When they finally stood before the judge, Lena's voice quivered as she told her story. But she didn't falter. Not this time. The judge examined the ledger, eyebrows lifting. Young lady, he said gravely, you just handed us a stick of dynamite, and I think it's about time we lit the fuse. Chapter 6. Redemption in Dustwater. The trial that followed rocked half the territory. Lena's husband was exposed, arrested, and the bounty dropped. The papers called her a hero, but Lena didn't care for fame. She returned to Dustwater with Reid, quieter but stronger. The townsfolk, seeing her differently now, welcomed her. Even Sheriff Briggs tipped his hat with respect. Lena moved into a small cottage on Reid's land, not far from a barn where they met. Her fingers, once broken, began to play piano again, soft melodies that drifted through the dusk. One day, while fencing the far field, Reid turned to her and said, I ain't never asked you to stay. Lena looked at him. You didn't have to. They married beneath the open sky, no fancy dresses or church bells, just a preacher, a few friends, and the wind whispering through prairie grass. Epilogue, the brighter path. Years later, folks still talk about the woman who came out of hiding and took down a crooked tycoon. But to Lena, that part of her story belonged to the past. What mattered was a quiet laughter over morning coffee, the way Reid would hum when mending gear, or how the porch swing creaked when they watched the stars. She'd come to Dustwater to disappear. Instead, she found a man who saw her pain and waited, without demand, until she was ready to live again. Not as a victim, not as a fugitive, but as a woman reborn, a woman finally walking her brighter path.